Joining me today in the Capital TV show, George Papadopoulos. He's former advisor for President Trump in energy security. Mr. Papadopoulos, hello.
Thank you so much for having me.
You are the author of a book titled Deep State Target: How I Got Caught in the Crosshairs of the Plot to Bring Down President Trump. Can you please tell us in brief what it's all about?
Sure, and thank you so much for having me. It essentially is an inside account of the plot of the intelligence services of not only the United States, but other allied intelligence services to effectively sabotage the Donald Trump campaign in 2016 and handcuff him from properly governing the country once he was elected president. And it's something that not only the United States has lived over the last 4 years, but I think the world community itself has actually been quite impacted by the various investigations or witch hunts, as President Trump likes to call them, into his administration. So it's essentially an inside account of how these investigations manifested, why they manifested, and who some of the key architects of it were.
Mm-hmm. So you had a pardon in 2019 or 2020. Can you tell us more about this experience?
Sure. So, of course, as I was working for first Ben Carson and then Donald Trump, my background was in energy security. I used to work in Washington, D.C. for years at a very prominent neoconservative think tank called the Hudson Institute, in which I obtained a very important expertise that created this target or this type of interest in my work. And then as soon as, of course, I joined two presidential campaigns, that target followed me, and there was various entrapment efforts that led to one thing after another. So in the beginning, there was a lot of confusion about exactly what had happened to me. The Donald Trump campaign, the media, of course, was not allied with the president. And once new information, of course, came out about the situation, what really was going on, President Trump decided to pardon me and just one or two other individuals, which I was very grateful for, because I think he understood the facts of the situation. And it's going to be quite important for not only himself, but the Republican Party and the country as a whole moving forward, especially as these new investigations continue.
Mm-hmm. From your experience, how do you evaluate the Biden administration policies in energy sector? Will it be affected negatively the impact on the Middle East and on the American economy?
First, we have to look at the American economy. Gas prices today are basically correlated with inflation prices, and we haven't seen inflation this high in 30 years. Gas prices haven't been high this decades in America at a time when the U.S. economy is just getting out of a pandemic. So clearly this is impacting the U.S. Pocketbooks, the American workers, and American jobs, because of course there's been this attack or this war by the environmentalists and the Biden administration on the oil and gas sector. The Biden administration's own energy secretary has been quite hostile towards fracking in the United States. And this is something, of course, that, and I can also go on with other examples, by banning the Keystone Pipeline, creating a ban on offshore drilling and these moratoriums on federal water that the Biden administration has prevented from U.S. oil companies from drilling. So, of course, this has had a negative impact on U.S. shale producers having the ability to actually export energy, which the United States, which was a net exporter under the Trump administration, into now a net importer once again. And it's actually given tremendous clout once again to the swing producers, which are OPEC. And this is something, of course, that President Trump tried to prevent. And he had a quite stable energy market with OPEC, while the United States was such a tremendous oil producer. So this is the domestic impact, and of course, oil is a global commodity. So of course, it impacts the world. However, moving forward, the Biden administration is actually allowing competitors or enemy states, if you want to call them that, like Russia or Iran, to effectively have quite more leverage in terms of exporting their own energy to not only Europe, but to the Asian market And this really does not feed into the U.S. interest whatsoever, not only domestically, but in terms of geopolitics abroad. And this is something that while I was advising the president and his team, we were quite focused on assuring that the United States would actually allow its oil to be used as a geopolitical tool instead of a curse like we're witnessing today.
So Biden, he blamed Saudi Arabia for the inflation inside the USA. And we know that Prince Abdulaziz bin Salman, the energy minister of Saudi Arabia, he answered that question if he's responsible, if Saudi Arabia is responsible of blocking the negotiation. He said it's an American fabricated allegations. What is your comment?
My comment is it goes exactly to what I stated. The United States, OPEC is the swing producer and has been since the 70s. However, under the Trump administration, the United States had a renaissance, a shale renaissance, I should say, which allowed it to stabilize the energy markets based on its own export of massive quantities of LNG to the global market, which are tied into oil prices on the spot market. So the Biden administration putting the blame on a country in which now, like Saudi Arabia, in which the Biden administration is now forced to work more closely with and have Saudi Arabia produce more oil in order to lower prices, is not something that the Biden administration should have even had to deal with the king in Saudi Arabia. He have unleashed his own potential here in the United States. So this is something that I think is just an excuse in order to deflect from the problems that the Biden administration has caused here at home.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about the United Arab Emirates contribution? It's a rich country in oil. Of course, they are linked to energy policies, but now they are going into they have a great policy in climate change. How do you assess this behavior of these policies?
I see the United Arab Emirates as a country in which I've traveled to. I've actually while I was working in Washington D.C. I had attended a young leaders program to the United Arab Emirates, in which we actually were hosted there by the Prime Minister Al Maktoum. And I still have the newspaper in which we're in the front page with him at the Dubai School of Government. So I've actually seen this transformation of not only Dubai, but of the entire United Arab Emirates, from really a desert oasis to this world-renowned city and country in which is small in scale, but has a global impact. And that doesn't only include clean tech, energy, but now foreign policy. The United Arab Emirates is coordinating very closely with other American allies in the Mediterranean, including Greece, Cyprus, Israel, to basically hedge an emboldened, and in my opinion, quite dangerous foreign policy by the Turkish government. So I think the United Arab Emirates is doing quite a stabilizing job in that part of the world.
Foreign Affairs Minister Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed visited Syria. He met with Bashar al-Assad, and the result is maybe there is some cooperation in energy sector. How do you see this visit after 10 years of boycott?
Well, and this is actually what my specialty actually was actually analyzing the energy markets in the Eastern Mediterranean. And when I was very focused on that part of the world between 2010 and 2016, energy was just discovered offshore Cyprus. Then you had it offshore Egypt, then Lebanon. There's a tremendous gas potential offshore Lebanon. However, there's a delimitation and maritime disputes between Israel and Lebanon, which are preventing the exploitation of those resources. And Syria has the exact same situation. It's all part of the same geological terrace, and it's no surprise that Syria now, should the civil war be subsiding, and we now know that it's going to be essentially a country divided upon spheres of influence among the great powers, that there will be other smaller powers like United Arab Emirates who have interests in that part of the world, including Syria. So it's no surprise that they would be looking to invest in reconstruction in many ways of Syria moving forward.
George, do you see that negotiation between Lebanon and Israel, if it goes further in the border, or it include a deal on the gas and oil, or an agreement on this, do you think that will resolve many problems in the region?
Okay, so that's a very good question, and I was always a proponent and a believer that gas should be a win-win for that part of the world and not a curse, because in the Middle East, usually oil was a curse in many ways. It led to various wars and conflicts that have still yet to be resolved. And in the Eastern Mediterranean, these are countries, most of them, the maritime countries like Syria, Lebanon, Israel, Egypt, Cyprus, Greece, Turkey, who were really oil and gas dependent throughout their entire history. Yet when they began to discover this oil bonanza in 2010, first in Cyprus, and 2011 in Israel, and moving forward in Egypt and Lebanon, of course, I saw potential, and I saw that this energy developments could actually link these countries into more stability. And that's exactly what we are seeing, quite frankly. We're seeing a growing alliance among Greece, Cyprus, Egypt, the United Arab Emirates, Israel, to develop this various gas and to export it not only to the European market, but also to the Asian Pacific market through the Suez Canal. Now, between Israel and Lebanon, they're currently in a state of war. And the most problematic situation that Lebanon finds itself in my opinion, it's not its relationship or its non-existent relationship with Israel, but its own domestic affairs. They still have not been able to recover due off the explosion in the Beirut port. There's a lot of dysfunction in the country. I actually was in Lebanon myself during that same exact leadership program when I went to the United Arab Emirates. And I saw that there are 17 different religions that are ensconced within the Lebanese constitution. There's a lot of different players involved. There's a lot of division. There's a lot of tension because of the various civil wars that have never been quite resolved. So I think Lebanon today has to deal with its domestic affairs first, and then probably talk or deal with, if it has relationships, which I know it does, with Cyprus, which is a very important country in this new alliance formation in the Mediterranean, to understand how it could possibly work with Cyprus and then eventually with Greece, and then possibly use them as intermediaries with Lebanon, because I do not believe that there will be direct negotiations between Israel and Lebanon to deal with this very interesting development regarding gas. So the Lebanese will likely have to deal with the other countries, including Greece, Cyprus, and possibly Egypt, to work some sort of agreement out with the Israelis.
How do you look at the Abraham Accords? Do you see a future of it? How it affects the efficiency for the Middle East?
I thought that it's simply realpolitik. It's, in my opinion, this is something that was already very much under the radar in the Middle East. I think the Israelis and these countries were cooperating in many spheres, primarily in security over the last decade or so, because they have a common enemy or a common threat, and that's Iran. I think Iran is a tremendous destabilizing force in the Middle East, and they have their own interests of hegemony, not only in Iraq, but in Syria and Lebanon. Of course, Hezbollah is effectively controlled by the Iranian state. We have Hamas being financed today by Iran, in Yemen as well. So this is something that I think the global community had to deal with, and the Israelis, along with their Arab partners, saw a win-win to deal with this potential enemy, while also working in spheres of cooperation like energy development, security, and hoping that there could be trade among the Middle East, because at the end of the day, jobs create stability, non-violence creates stability, and this is something that I think was the purpose of this accord.
You said also don't focus on the trees, but focus on the forest, that a populist nationalist candidate and his team and 75 million Americans went against. That's at the heart of the criminal acts by the Clinton campaign now finally being revealed. Stay tuned. We want to know right now. We don't want to stay tuned. So can you tell us more?
From the beginning of this incredibly interesting story, because the story that I've described here to you regarding this situation is actually, not only has it turned the United States upside down for 4 years, it's actually launched 3 separate investigations into it. The first, of course, actually 4, I should say. The first was a Comey FBI investigation. Then we had Bob Mueller. Then we had the Inspector General Horowitz looking into things. And now finally, we have John Durham, who's a second special counsel prosecutor looking into the same exact situation. And what I meant by that tweet is you had to look at what was happening in 2016 and 2015, even into 2017, what the world political community looked like at that time. You had Brexit as the #1 issue in the United Kingdom. You had the Trans-Pacific Partnership, global trade agreement, something that all of Southeast Asia, including Australia, wanted to subscribe to and hoped that the United States would be part of it. You had Russia being viewed as the biggest threat to NATO security and even Central Asia and in Syria. So you have a new candidate, a candidate like Donald Trump at the time, who was espousing different viewpoints to so many of these issues. And those 3 issues, as I explained, he was pro-Brexit. While when I would speak with the British establishment throughout my time working with Trump, they were very hostile towards candidate Trump, his ideas of Brexit. They thought that it was a destabilizing decision for him to support the United Kingdom outside of Europe. And this is something that the British establishment was watching very closely. So it's no surprise that the British government now has been implicated in many ways in what was going on against the Trump campaign. And then moving forward with the other issues regarding the establishment, with this hostility with Russia, when you have a candidate like Trump who wanted to work with Russia to stabilize the world, and the military-industrial complex did not want that, of course, there was going to be tension. So that's what I mean by the system behind these 2 individuals like Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, who unfortunately got too much of the media attention over the last years.
My last question, you are very close to President Trump, former president. Will he run for the 2024 presidency election? And if so, will he win, in your opinion?
In my opinion, I'm 100% certain that President Trump will announce that he will be running again. However, I think it's going to come after the midterms. I think the midterms are actually even more important than the 2024 election, because even if President Trump runs and he wins in 2024, which I expect, if he doesn't have a Congress to work with, he's simply going to run into the same exact situation that he dealt with after 2018. After 2018, when the Republicans lost Congress, the president wasn't able to really enact much of his agenda domestically, including he wasn't able to finish the border wall, other domestic programs that he was working with, and he was dealing with various impeachment efforts. He had 2 impeachments that he had to deal with. So this, of course, handcuffed him from governing the country properly. So I think the most important election is coming up in a little over 10 months, and that's the 2022 midterms. I think the president is going to be very vocal in terms of supporting America First candidates and using his growing popularity, that he's probably more popular now than he was while he was president, to get those candidates elected, and then he'll announce he's going to run for president.
George Papadopoulos, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being on the Capital TV show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Hey, Maria Malouf here. Please click to like and subscribe to Maria Malouf TV YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.